What if I told you that as an e-commerce seller, you could potentially be putting everything you have at risk? Your home, your car, your savings, your investments, all of those things could be on the line if you don't have the right documents for your LLC. You started your e-commerce business to create freedom, financial freedom. But what you could actually be doing is putting your financial freedom on the line. All of your assets could be at risk. And it's exactly what thousands of people who start up e-commerce businesses do without even realizing. I'm Jonathan Finiak. I'm an attorney, and I've helped over 80,000 people form companies, and thousands of them were e-commerce sellers just like you. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what you need to do to shield your personal assets from all those risks that come with selling physical products to the public. I'm going to reveal the critical mistakes so many e-commerce sellers make when they don't do these things, and ultimately they leave themselves completely exposed to liability. Let me walk you through situations that I see way too often. You set up an e-commerce store in your personal name. You're selling products online. Business is growing. Life is good. You think you're on the right track, but then one day a customer claims your product hurt them, or a supplier, for some reason, sues you, saying you didn't perform under the contract. Or it could be the state that comes after you saying you did not collect the appropriate amount of sales tax. These are real world scenarios that affect e-commerce sellers every day. And without the legal protection of a limited liability company, here's what could happen next. They don't go after just your business, because there is no business. You are the business. They sue you personally. You are named in a lawsuit. If they win, they get your personal bank account. They can get your car. They can put liens on your house. They can go after your investments. They can even garnish your future wages if you get out of the e-commerce business altogether. You think it's not going to happen to me? I have to tell you that businesses get sued every day. And if you don't set up a business entity, you could be putting it all on the line. All your chips are in on every hand. And a lot of people say, my business is too small. I'm just, I'm selling $10,000, maybe $20,000 worth of product. I'm going to be okay. That is not the truth. Listen, physical products, contracts with manufacturer, it's a lot different than if you're doing consulting, right? With consulting, who could get hurt, right? You can't slip and fall over advice. You could potentially get a malpractice claim against you, but the idea here is that physical products come with a whole lot of potential danger. You're dealing with regulations across multiple states. Products are passing through your hands. They're passing through wholesalers' hands. They may have come from a foreign country. They may contain lead. They may be dangerous. Online businesses are increasingly being targeted by consumers and plaintiffs' attorneys who are willing to take their case on contingency, meaning they have nothing to lose. It's not all doom and gloom, right? There is good news. There's a simple, affordable, easy way to protect your personal assets from those business e-commerce seller risks. And it's an LLC. You got to form it properly, but an LLC is a great legal structure that allows you to separate yourself from your business. You're effectively creating a new person. That new person will bear the brunt of the liability. The separation creates what lawyers call the corporate veil, and that corporate veil shields you from the risk associated with your e-commerce business, from selling personal assets, from business debts, from potential litigation related to contract disputes, and all of those things that could potentially go wrong. The key benefits of an LLC when it comes to e-commerce businesses are product liability claims, right? You should have product liability insurance. It is not a replacement for having product liability insurance. You should still have that. But claims can exceed your insurance coverage. You can get too many claims. It was a really faulty product, and it could end up exceeding your coverage. The LLC would protect you from that. It could come from disputes with contractors. The contractor says you didn't perform, you had an obligation to buy a lot more merchandise, added a zero you weren't aware of, and you may not be able to perform under those contracts. They could sue. They could go after you personally unless you have an LLC. There could be regulatory penalties and fines. Regulatory penalties and fines, as long as you're doing everything right, would be held against and be charged against the LLC, not you. And it can also protect you from business debts. If there's lines of credit in the name of the company, then you would not be personally liable. A lot of business credit does come with personal guarantees, so it's not going to protect you in those cases, but you can definitely protect yourself when you're not a personal guarantor. It's not all rainbows and unicorns, okay? There are limitations to an LLC, and you need to understand them, right? It's not going to protect you from personal wrongdoing. If you're out committing fraud, you're not shipping the product, you're going to be on the line, right? You can't use an LLC for a fraudulent or illegal purpose. It could also, again, as I said, the limitation, a lot of times you need to provide a personal guarantee when it comes to business debts. But for legitimate businesses where you're trying your best to deliver great products to customers through e-commerce and being an e-commerce seller, an LLC protects you from legitimate business risks. How do you get started? Okay. There's a couple of things we're going to go over here that are going to answer all the questions you have. Choose the right state for your business. Most e-commerce businesses aren't actually warehousing, doing direct shipping. They're using Amazon fulfillment, or they're using other third-party logistics companies to actually deliver the product to the customer. If you don't have a physical space in a state where you're shipping the product from, you don't have a warehouse with employees, then you should choose a state that provides you with the strongest protection. That state is Wyoming. Wyoming has low fees. It's easy to set up an LLC there, and the legislature has made it very easy to protect yourself from claims that may come against your LLC. You do everything online. You're not taking physical possession of the goods. You're not shipping from an office or a warehouse. Wyoming is great for you. Your situation may vary. Maybe you are doing the fulfillment yourself, right? You're not using that third-party logistics company or shipper to do it for you. In those cases, if you do have a physical address, you got an office, you got a warehouse, you're doing that kind of stuff, you may have to form an LLC in that home state. The default is form your LLC in Wyoming because the laws are the strongest in the country without question. You pick the state. Now, you got to pick a name, right? What are you going to name your company? A lot of people get really hung up on this, and they take time, and maybe they go and file they're doing a trademark for it or something else. Slow down, right? Your LLC name does not have to reflect the products you're selling. And I actually say don't make the LLC name reflect the products you're selling, because a lot of times you expand your offerings. You may start out selling one niche products, call it children's clothing, right? And then you decide, wait a minute, I want to sell clothing for teens. I want to sell clothing for adults, because you got the supply chain, you got the experience. I recommend you form a fairly generic name or use a fairly generic name for your LLC, and then you can use DBAs or trade names to really show that you're committed to a particular type of product or space. So choose something. It has to end with LLC or end with limited liability company, but make the name fairly generic. And this way, you're going to be able to grow your business without having to go do name changes or explain why you're selling women's clothes under a baby's clothing brand. One of the things you may want to do ahead of time, right? Pro tip, do a basic trademark search. You can go to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office website, USPTO, and you can look up if anyone's using that name. I don't recommend filing for a trademark when you're just getting started, right? What I recommend is you make sure you're not infringing on anyone else's trademark when you get started. And then if things start to go well, you can take that additional step to maybe get a trademark for your company. You got a name, you know what state. Next, you got to file articles of organization. Sometimes the names vary from state to state, but generally that's the document that brings your LLC to life. You need to fill it out according to there's some rules. You need to identify people who were involved with the company. You need to identify a registered agent, incredibly important. And you have to file it with the Secretary of State of whatever state you've chosen. Some states have an electronic process. Some states you have to file paper forms and send a check. The costs vary from state to state. Some states can be as low as $10. I've seen it at certain times. The states basically waive all fees, but then they can really go up from there depending on the state. $400, $500, $800 is really what it could cost you to form that LLC. Well, you can do it yourself. If you don't know what you're doing, you can make some mistakes and you can run into problems in the future. So I really recommend you get some guidance and advice on how to properly file those articles if you are going to do it yourself. The next thing you're going to need is an EIN, an employer identification number. People say, well, it's a single member LLC. I read that I can use my social security number. You know what? You are right. You can. Okay. But that is a mistake. And the reason it's a mistake is because now you haven't created a real separation between yourself and the LLC, right? It's got your social security number. I would use that against you if I'm suing you and say, this isn't even a real company. It just goes under John's social security number, which shows that he's not really serious about this. You want to be taken seriously. Highly recommend you get a professional to help you obtain that EIN and really streamline the process. You don't want to have any delays either. Get the EIN, get the bank account, and then you will be able to start selling product quickly. This is a big one. People say, do I need an operating agreement for my company? And the answer is technically no. Okay. There's default rules in the limited liability company laws. And they say this will happen in this scenario. This happens in that scenario. That happens in that scenario. You may not like those default rules. I know I don't. I don't like a lot of those default rules. And so what's important is you have an operating agreement that really is tailored to your needs. A lot of times, single member LLC, what are we concerned about? We're concerned about asset protection. So we want to make sure that that LLC operating agreement is drafted in a way that maximizes your asset protection within the confines and the restrictions of the law. But I have to say, the laws are really flexible in almost all cases. Any of the provisions, those default provisions in the law, you can override. Almost all of them can be overridden through your articles of organization or through your operating agreement. So it should include clear language that makes it clear you are separate from the business. And then you know what you got to do? You got to follow the operating agreement. Following the rules of the operating agreement is going to show and prove that you treat this as a real company. It's another thing that it's another checkbox for you that shows that this company is real. And that's going to be your best defense against piercing the corporate veil and being held personally responsible for business liabilities or debt. Another thing you got to get is the business bank account, right? You want to create a clear separation between personal finances and business finances. That prevents veil piercing, right? You're treating it like a real company. It also makes sure that you are taking care of taxes and things like that. If you're making money with your business, you typically are going to be required to file quarterly forms with the IRS and make quarterly tax payments. It's hard to figure out how much money you earned if it's all going into your personal account. Maybe you got W-2 earnings or you have multiple businesses going to the same account. How much taxes are you going to owe? And if you underpay your taxes, that's going to lead to penalties and interest at year end. The other great benefit of having a business bank account is that it's great audit protection. Asset protection does involve protecting yourself from the IRS, right? Underpayment of taxes, you didn't, you took too many deductions, these are personal expenses, so on and so forth. If you've got a business bank account and all the money from your business goes into it and all the expenses and buying products and marketing, all that come out of it, you've got an amazingly clear record and you can go into that audit very confident that you're going to prevail. So let's recap, okay? An LLC creates a shield, creates a separate legal entity, separate from you, that will absorb the risk, that will absorb the liability associated with running an e-commerce business, and it protects your personal assets from claims or bad things that may happen related to that business. It only works if you set it up and maintain it properly, however. So every day you're out there and you're selling physical products, you are potentially exposing all of your personal assets to risk. So there's really no time to waste. Once you start selling a product, you really should have an LLC.